I have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and sharing. My name is Frank Salvato, and you can find everything we do at undergroundusa.com. The conservative bloc recently celebrated the paring down of the 1,500-page continuing resolution that kept the government open. Part of that celebration centered on the defunding of the Global Engagement Center, which the learned pointed out was an integral cog in the deep state anti-First Amendment censorship apparatus. However, the reports of the center's death have been greatly exaggerated. The so-called Global Engagement Center sounds about as threatening as a high school debate club. But in the wise words of Vivek Ramaswamy, it was actually a linchpin in what we might call the censorship industrial complex. Its mission? Supposedly to combat foreign state and non-state propaganda and disinformation efforts aimed at undermining or influencing the policies, security, or stability of the United States, its allies, and partner nations. Foreign, they emphasize, because A, apparently the truth is only offensive when it comes from outside our borders, and B, political censorship is forbidden in the First Amendment. Here's the kicker. The Global Engagement Center, like its cousins in the deep state alphabet soup of government agencies, and think CIA, FBI, and all those other three-letter nightmares, was supposed to be our shield against foreign threats. But, and especially over the Obama and Biden years, this shield has been turned inward, targeting those pesky American citizens who dare think differently, especially on topics like COVID, or Hunter Biden's laptop, or the manufacture of the J6 events. The Global Engagement Center, it seems, was more like a junior partner in Big Brother's surveillance state, keeping tabs on wrongthink. Because, heaven forbid, they wouldn't directly censor Americans. That pesky First Amendment thing gets in the way, don't you know? The Global Engagement Center played it coy. They funded the British-based Global Disinformation Index. This group was less about fighting disinformation and more about creating a blacklist for publications like The Washington Examiner, Real Clear Politics, and The New York Post. The result? A financial guillotine for conservative voices, with ad revenue drying up faster than the initiatives promised by the BLM activists who built millions from their supporters and immediately abandoned them. Then came the bureaucratic masterstroke. The Global Engagement Center's funding was tucked away in that behemoth 1,500-page legislative monstrosity, the continuing resolution to keep the government open. It was like serving a scoop of bureaucracy with a side of contempt, drawing the ire of Elon Musk and others. But after much outrage and protest, the spendthrifts of Congress managed to shave it down to a mere 120 pages, cutting the Global Engagement Center's funding and retreating from legislator pay raises. Crisis averted? Not quite. The joy. No, I'm not talking Kamala Harris joy. The joy was fleeting. Like a magic trick, the State Department pulled a rabbit out of its hat, rebranding the Global Engagement Center as the Counter Foreign Information Manipulation and Interference Hub. Isn't that a mouthful? Same people, new sign on the door, and a budget that miraculously realigned itself. It's like watching a bad magician perform at a second-rate political fundraiser. Now, with Donald Trump's second term looming, the questions are these. Will he be able to successfully play whack-a-mole with these bureaucratic hydra heads? Or will Republican infighting and the voraciousness of the deep state apparatus mute his efforts to rein in the bureaucracy and tame the beast? There's talk of a vibe shift, a cultural sea change where even former center leftists and moderately inclined never-Trumpers are jumping on the MAGA bandwagon. But as some prematurely celebrate, we must all remember that rebranding doesn't mean reform. In fact, it's not even close. It's a repackaging of the very initiatives we determined were outrageous in the first place. The Global Engagement Center lives under an assumed alias. The deep state bureaucracy, so focused on chiseling away at our First Amendment rights, lives on. So here we stand, at the precipice of what could be a significant cultural, governmental, and political upheaval. We have a real chance to tame the deep state beast and protect our First Amendment right to free speech. But that will require us, all of us, to keep the pressure on. That means making sure our elected creatures in Congress hear from us regularly about the consequences they will face if they don't support the Reformation from top to bottom, including the CIA, DOJ, FBI, State Department, and the IRS. If they don't support that Reformation that was mandated by the people in the re-election of Donald Trump to the presidency. If we don't keep the pressure on, an Alinsky rule, by the way, everything we have achieved to date will be just another episode in the endless saga of government inefficiency and overreach. Will Trump and his team truly be able to dismantle the deep state bureaucracy apparatus? They will if we do our part by keeping the pressure on. But should we fail in our duty to advance our return to constitutional government, all we will see is the same old song and dance, just with a different choreography and under a new production company. Only time will tell if we're witnessing the death throes of a bloated, ineffective, and nepotistic deep state bureaucracy, or merely watching its latest act of self-preservation. When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station, WGUL AM 930 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
State Farm says they're a good neighbor. But would a good neighbor target 5-year-olds for conversations about sexual identity? State Farm did. For 6 months, they asked employees to donate guides to being transgender to public schools. Books aimed at making kindergartners question their identity. How do parents know where State Farm put these books? What's State Farm doing about it? Visit AskStateFarmWhy.com.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Well, I hope that you had a great weekend. And, today is a very interesting day, Frank, because it's January the 6th. And Kamala Harris, ironically, is going to have to certify the election of Donald Trump. It must be a great day for her. What do you think?
Oh, I'm sure it's very depressing. Yeah. I'm sure it was depressing for Al Gore as well. This happens in American politics in a peaceful transition of power. So occasionally when the vice president wants to seek the presidency and fails at getting elected, they have to preside over something they'd rather be on the other side of.
Yep. Exactly right. Right.
It'll be interesting to see if she shoots her mouth off. It seems to be the modus operandi for the neo-progressive left to take inopportune moments to make statements. But something tells me that she'll either be sedated enough or have decorum enough not to do that.
Well, I hope so. And she didn't look too good or sound too good on Friday when she flubbed the Pledge of Allegiance. That's just par for the course, it seems like, with Kamala Harris.
I think she was probably doing a happy hour with Nancy Pelosi.
That's right. Now that Pelosi's back in the U.S., But after that was terrible having the hip replacement. But Frank, I think since the last time we talked, we were anticipating the vote on Friday for the speakership, and that ended up going well. I mean, a couple of votes got changed after the first vote there, but he did retain the speaker's gavel. Mike Johnson did, but he's saying he wants to come up with a big, beautiful bill for Donald Trump, and they want to start. He wants to get rid of the deep state along the way. But they've got some very small margins. Well, where do you see all this going?
Well, I wish him luck in that. I really honestly wish that we would have somebody come to the forefront who would say we need to do standalone legislation. Mm-hmm. You know, whenever a politician says we're going to pass this massive omnibus bill that does all this, that's Washington speak for, and you better look at what's tucked in between in the important parts, because that's where the pork is. You know, we saw it in a 1,500-page bill that he wanted to, that he brought to the floor for a vote in a reconciliation bill that had funding for agencies that actually promoted censorship here in the United States, along with pay raises. You know, that we had to scream and keep the pressure on, and yell and scream to our elected officials to say, "What are you doing? Don't do that." We had some good voices on the floor that said they wouldn't vote for it because it was ridiculous, and that got pared down to an 800-page bill, or I think a 120-page bill. Mm-hmm. You know, so this idea that we always have to couple everything together, it allows our elected officials to have plausible deniability about why they voted the way they did, instead of putting them on the record and in the hot seat of, okay, here's issue 1. How do you stand on it? Because this is going to be your vote. We're not attaching anything to it. There's no amendments. You know, you go through the process and you bring it to the floor for the final vote on the bill about this subject. Vote. That's how we get a clearer scorecard of things as the electorate. But when you've got 35 things in a bill, along with add-ons and amendments that people have tucked into the folds in the legalese, you know, no wonder people don't understand what's happening in Congress. And I think they do it on purpose. You know, I'd like to see him get to a point where he's saying, we're going to do the agenda. We're going to do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Instead of, we're going to put 1 to 5 together and vote on that after everybody gets a chance to manipulate a little bit. If we're going to break the status quo and business as usual in Washington, stop doing business as usual.
Mm-hmm. Well, how did they, and I'm with you, how did they stop the horse trading? That seems to be what drives a lot of this bundling stuff together, and I'll do this, but I'll got to have this thing in there and so forth. Can Trump use the bully pulpit for that, or what do you think?
You just have to keep exposing it. In the 1980s, there was a Senate president in Illinois named Page Phillip who said nothing's coming to the floor in here unless it's standalone. We're just not doing that, so don't bring it, or I won't bring it to the floor. And
interesting.
And we had a balanced budget. And in just that time, because they got, after his tenure in office, after that time, they all went back to the horse trading, and now Illinois is just as well off as New York and California with their with their budget. So exactly. It can be done, but you need the intestinal fortitude to be able to do it.
You know, Frank, over the last couple of days, we got a really nice message from a listener named Joanne, and Joanne listens to us from Canada. And it was great to get a message all the way from Canada. But of course, I'm wondering what you might think about this new report that Prime Minister Trudeau is going to resign, maybe today, maybe in the next couple of days. But that's because everybody has a real problem with their liberal policies now. So what do you think is happening in Canada? And And all joking aside, I mean, Trump did say it should become the 51st state, but I don't think it's going to go that extreme. But what do you think?
No, and I wrote an article about that back around the Christmas time when he said that about Canada, and what he was doing was throwing a wild thing out there to seed something that was a lot less. You know, he wanted to see the Trudeau regime come to an end in Canada, so he said something that was 10 times further down the field than just the first down, and that makes sense. That's what you do. You always ask for way more than what you want, and then when the other side thinks they're compromising, you actually get what you want. It's the art of the deal. I think, and we always give, people who are hardcore conservative down here always give Canada a hard time for being leftist, but it's not. It's a little bit more liberal than we are down here in the United States, but they hold the same principles in what would be their constitution. What we have in the Bill of Rights is actually worked into their governing documents as well. Mm-hmm. So that's why we have such a close kinship with them, besides the very long border that we have. So when you have these governments in Canada that are just ultra left, they don't really represent the will of the mainstream people. It's a byproduct of elections and election turnout, just like it is down here in the United States. The United States is a center-right country. There's no reason we should have had Joe Biden. There's no reason we should have had Barack Obama. They were marketed correctly, and they made sure to get the vote out when they had the best chance to do it because their marketing was good. Same thing happens in Canada. So I think Trudeau's leaving is a good thing for the Canadian people. Maybe they can get their tax problem under control. But I think there's going to be a good relationship with the next prime minister and the president. It was there last time. And Trudeau, really, if he was going to stay in office, if he hadn't really gotten his own party to say, you got to go, I think he probably would have calmed down quite a bit when he talked to President Trump after January 20th. But I hope good things for the Canadian people, and I hope their next leader is a little bit more representative of who the country is.
No, I hear you. Absolutely. Agree 100%. And, I think good things can come of this. And while that's happening too, Frank, we had the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, come and visit Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, saying she's ready to work with the administration. It just seems that, you've got these different world leaders, and I think, Frank, that they're ecstatic that it's Donald Trump, because I think even if they may not agree with them 100% on political issues per se, they know that they can work with him as a professional much more so than they could have ever done with Kamala Harris had she won the election.
I think the larger picture here is that you've got world leaders who are now elected to office in places like Italy and Argentina, who understand that the socialist model for governance doesn't work. And what they're looking for is a big dog in the arena to say, we're on board with that. We've got to get back to what capitalism, responsible capitalism is. And we got to get back to freedom rather than oppression. And you have that in Italy, and you absolutely have that in Argentina. And that's another world leader, Milei, who came and talked to Donald Trump. He was the very first leader to come to Mar-a-Lago after the election to speak and break bread with Donald Trump. And he's doing amazing things down in Argentina. Everything we need to do here. So
exactly.
When you've got these leaders like this on the world stage who say, boy, I'm glad it's not Kamala Harris, and I'm glad it's you because you said that you want to get back to good. It's an effort to push back against this bizarre, woke, neo-Marxist, socialist crap that's been happening all over the free world. They want to turn the page. The people of their countries want to turn the page and get back to prosperity. So it's a good sign that these people say, we'll stand with you, because it's lonely standing on that change stage all by yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And can you imagine, Frank, it wasn't that long ago when a day like today would just be kind of unthinkable, that all these things would be coming together so well. The transition has been going swimmingly. All these things you were just talking about, and how amazing it is that these other elected officials, they want to get back to good. They want these principles that actually work. It's just amazing. 6 months ago, it was, nope, it's going to be, Kamala's going to come in. It's all going to be, the Democrats, and people were feeling pretty sad about that stuff. But now they've got a lot of joy.
Well, and not Kamala Harris joy either.
That's right. Yeah, not the fake joy.
Yeah, not the fake joy.
Yeah, but the actual genuine. And I don't know. I feel it with people I talk to and so forth. People just seem on the whole more optimistic about the future at this point.
Freedom makes people feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom makes people feel that way. When you give people their own lives, control over their own lives, they tend to be happier. That's just the way it is. I can't tell you how many psychological studies have been done on that. From rats to humans, it doesn't matter. When a living creature has more freedom, they're more happy. That's why.
Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that. That's why Marxism and socialism and the oppressive ideologies don't work. You need weapons to force people to function in those societies. And that's why people try to get out of those countries. We look at the people coming over the southern border, and we're kind of pissed because they're not coming the way they should be coming. But they do want to come here for a reason. Mm-hmm. And people trying to get out of China, they're doing that for a reason. Venezuela, they're doing it for a reason. Cuba, they're doing it for a reason. It's because freedom is the natural state of a human being. So, all these, when you trade security for your freedom, you're getting neither. And that's why you got to be very careful when the government says, I'm here to help you, because when the government comes to help you, you lose your freedom. Bit by bit, inch by inch, step by step.
Yep, exactly right. And it's the misery that people endure, whether they were in the Soviet Union or any of these kinds of oppressive regimes that you were talking about. It is that misery. And I think that with the overt, sort of emulation of that by the Democrat Party elite, trying to control literally every aspect of our lives under the guise of environmentalism or climate change or DEI or we're going to prevent racism or all that, whatever they want to call it. It just continues to be much more oppressive. And I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and it's all crap. The only reason, when is the last time they rescinded a bill? When's the last time they looked at something they passed years ago and it just doesn't work? And they say, you know what? That's not right. Let's take a vote to get rid of it.
No, they won't do that because that was so-and-so's legislation. And we're going to honor them by keeping them going forever. That kind of stuff.
They are greedy power junkies. And the only way they can substantiate their existence in power is to keep passing laws because they're doing something good for you.
There's never any shortage of stuff to talk about, Frank. I don't know why that is, but it always seems to be that way. But certainly, I think there's a lot of concern, number one, about the Chinese hacking of the telecom companies. But we've also got now this undersea cable that seems to have been deliberately cut. Could that be foreshadowing anything to do with China wanting to make a move against Taiwan, do you think?
Well, they're notorious for that. They've had some responsibility of that over in the theater, the European theater as well. It's about exerting power and influence and hobbling and being as disruptive as they possibly can. I think it's a little late in the Biden game for China to be thinking about moving on Taiwan. If they were going to do it, it would have been when we had somebody in the White House who wouldn't have responded to that, but with words. And I think they understand that if they move on Taiwan, the economic pressure that would be put on them, not only from the United States, but on the world stage, by a group led by the United States, it would be crippling to their economy. And even Xi has come out and said that his economy's not doing well. So I don't think that's in the cards right now. But as far as being disruptors, they don't have a problem with that. Mm-hmm. They really don't, because they understand that when you cut communications or you do things to disrupt the normal practice, it takes a country and companies from those countries, it uses their resources to try to get it back. So it's economic warfare when you're doing this. Yes, it does interrupt the communications, and yes, it does make things harder for everyday life for these people, which could hobble readiness and everything else. Mm-hmm. But the biggest impact there is economic. They understand that one of the big battlefields in the world today comes on the battlefield of economies.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. And with this hacking issue too, it's never any fun to have to, realize that they are actually doing this, I'm sure, on a daily basis to one extent or another. But, Frank, do you think the incoming Trump administration will handle this differently or make it a priority or try to, hit back in some way? Because these kinds of infiltrations aren't friendly. And, I think some could call it even an act of war to some degree.
No, I'm not going to saber rattle like that, although we should have addressed this issue decades ago with intellectual property rights. Mm-hmm. I mean, decades ago. We didn't do that. Obama did absolutely nothing, and before Clinton did absolutely nothing about it. It's just a very bad situation that they've been allowed to get their tentacles so far into the United States. I think that's where you're going to see the change with the Trump administration is it's no. And the best way to counter it is to be able to stop it. And when you have an intelligence community and a law enforcement community and a Justice Department community, a State Department community, it's not hyper-focused on ridiculous issues like LGBTQ and transgenderism, mm-hmm. and everything is racist around the corner, and the real enemy is the people within, the domestic terrorists that actually care about what their kids are getting taught about. When you retask those agencies to say, okay, we've got some serious work to do here. Find these people out, find out how they're doing it, and figure out how to stop it. And then figure out how to put up red flag mechanisms so we could see when they're doing it so we could shut it down immediately. There's no reason we should be behind technologically in being able to figure these things out and stop it. We just have to task our resources correctly. So when all of a sudden your intellectual property stays yours and your communications and your private, your data stays yours, it hobbles the nefarious intent from bad foreign actors, and China's chief among them, when it comes to stealing things like this. Right. And that goes along with allowing them to buy land in the United States. There shouldn't be a foreign national or a foreign country that is allowed to own land in the United States. Other countries forbid it. You can't go to the Bahamas and buy land there as a U.S. citizen or any citizen from anywhere else in the world because you have to be Bahamian. You can lease mm-hmm. it. You can lease the land. That's fine, but you can't own it. And yet China owns millions and millions of acres of farmland and land adjacent to military bases.
The military bases. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no reason for that.
Well, there is and I'm just trying to be a little facetious here, but, there is, if you have an agenda that says, how do we start undermining the national security of the United States of America? We just let this happen. And you're right. You mentioned about the military bases. That to me is a non-starter. How is this even allowed at all?
Even the farmland. You let the farmers farm the farmland. We don't need China here owning farmland. For what good reason?
Right.
You have enough people here in the United States who would love to farm that land. Give them the opportunity. Just imagine what would happen to food shortages, and would there be a lot of starving people in the United States if we just mind our own business with that, and farm our land and feed our people, and get out of the business of saying you can't be a cattle rancher because cow farts are bad for climate change?
Right.
And that's a ridiculous thing too. And this whole charade with the climate change garbage has got to stop. If you want to be good to the environment, then be good to the environment. It's one thing to say stop polluting. It's another thing to come up with fake markets based on carbon. If we don't have CO2 here how many people with advanced degrees have to say this? If we don't have CO2, trees don't grow.
Right. Yeah.
Nothing grows without it. So how stupid do you have to be to fall for, we've got to capture it. Just stop it.
Yep. Well, it's a control mechanism, and
yes,
and it's
exactly.
And it never gets better because they'll never come out and declare we are now in sync with the environment. We are harmonious, and we can stop doing what we're doing.
And we're not going to be in sync with the environment. We're human beings,
right?
We're just not. But it doesn't mean we have to be destructive to it. Back in the 70s, if you're as old as I am, back in the 70s, there were public service announcements all the time about, hey, don't litter, man. Don't do it.
Well,
they would show pictures of people throwing bags of fast food out, the garbage out from their car onto the highways. Don't do that. Be responsible with your trash, and if you see something sitting on the side of the road that shouldn't be there and you're walking by it, pick it up.
Yeah, and back then, Frank, there was the Native American who was crying. Yeah,
crying in it.
Yeah,
we had. It's a great thing to want to clean up the environment. Do it where it needs cleaning up, but don't invent BS to enrich an elitist class with a brand new market and brand new taxes. To achieve nothing. Kathy Hochul spends $450 million, $45 million on private jets, and she's lecturing people about climate change.
Right.
Give me a break. So, getting back to common sense is a big move towards reestablishing personal choice, individualism, and freedom here in the United States. But we've got to be responsible enough to be able to own that freedom.
Yep. Well said, Frank. This has been a lot of fun this morning, as always. Frank Salvato, everybody. UndergroundUSA.com is the website. The book is Nullification. Thank you, my friend. We'll look forward to talking with you again on Friday.
Stay low, my friend.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Some people won't give you the real talk on drugs, but it's time we know the facts. Fentanyl is killing people. It's a powerful opioid, often made illegally and commonly mixed with illicit drugs. It can even be pressed into counterfeit pills that resemble prescription medications. Just 2 milligrams, about the size of a few grains of sand, can potentially be lethal. This isn't an ad to scare you, but it is an ad to make you think twice. Get the facts. Go to realdealonfentanyl.com.
If you like the podcast, please head on over to undergroundusa.com and sign up for our Substack. It brings every new podcast and article directly into your email box, circumventing the fact checkers and the censors, both of which are useless. And please consider becoming a paid subscriber. For the price of less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks, you could support what we do. And believe me, we're a lot better for you than that Starbucks cup of coffee. And we've got less piercings. And remember to talk politics, religion, and current events with your family, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. When we have these conversations, we discover that we have more in common than we do in difference, and that goes all the way around, every subject. And that hobbles the ability of the deep state to divide us for their political opportunism. You're listening to Underground USA. No fear, no wokeism, no political correctness. My name is Frank Salvato.